When I think about my favorite games of 2025, I'm rarely thinking about complete experiences. Instead, I'm remembering moments. Brief stretches where mechanics, music, story, and emotion locked into place for me, before slipping back into something more uneven. It was a year where the highs were very high, but rarely sustained. So instead of trying to force a best games list out of a strange year, I want to talk about the moments that stayed with me anyway. Moments that I can place myself back inside with the same butterflies in my stomach and the same tears in my eyes. Because even when the full package doesn't hold together, the moments that work still matter to me. One quick warning before we start, this video will contain spoilers, so if you're spoiler conscious, I recommend checking out the list of games that are on your screen right now, or using the chapters to skip around. I'll give you a moment to do that at the beginning of each chapter, but within those chapters, you should expect spoilers for those games. Alright, let's get to it. I was hearing rumblings of And Roger after it was featured in a Steam Next Fest. I heard tell of a strong, terrifying start that might put people off, and the rumors were 100% true. I've not played a game that unsettled me the way that And Roger does and then completely flips that feeling on its head. The reveal in And Roger happens early enough that I won't ruin it for you here. I marvel at how deftly this game navigates between two very different tones, and how the developer's faith is present in the game without being overbearing. And Roger is a very short game that left an outsized impact, and you should definitely check out the podcast episode about it that my friends did over on .zip. Persona excels at the quiet moments. Despite the series being known by many as bombastic, loud, or colorful, I find that my strongest memories of my time with each game are calmer than that. I remember hanging out on the dormitory porch with Koromaru, and I remember going on little dates with Akechi at night. I started playing Persona 4 Golden this year, and while I personally think the game is a bit too quiet for my taste, the pattern still holds. My favorite part of this game is just getting on my scooter and riding around Inaba. People who love Persona 4 will often say that it's because that game nails the feeling of living in a small town. There's a comfort in that feeling for a lot of people. I grew up in a small suburb of a small city, and to be honest, I don't have nostalgia for it. But when I'm playing Persona 4 Golden and I get the chance to ride that scooter around this tiny little town, I get it. It's like I'm back in college, driving down back roads in the towns outside Stillwater, Oklahoma, listening to 2010s indie folk with no destination in mind. The scooter is the epitome of everything Persona is good at. The best moment that I had while playing Dispatch wasn't the game itself, it was the wait between episodes. Dispatch isn't doing anything particularly new with the superhero formula, at least not any more than James Gunn has already done with the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Suicide Squad, the Justice Gang, or Creature Commandos. The humor in Dispatch is pretty standard fare for the genre these days. I'd even classify it as juvenile sometimes. The romances are aggressively straight. There just aren't many big swings being taken with this script. So if you came to Dispatch looking for reinvention of the superhero genre, you're gonna be disappointed. But somehow none of that mattered to me. Dispatch works within its formula to deliver something so emotionally resonant that I don't care. This is a story about a team of misfits who have to learn how to work together, and through that struggle form a bond. It's playing the hits, but I'm singing along. Large parts of Dispatch work because the voice acting and the animation are top-notch. That should be expected as the cast is made up of a mix of Hollywood actors, YouTube gaming creators, and professional voice actors from the world of Critical Role. This is, in fact, a co-production between Critical Role and Ad Hoc Studio, which is a game studio made up of veterans of Night School Studio, Ubisoft, and most importantly, Telltale Games. It would be more surprising if animation and voice acting were not the best parts of this game. But the biggest boon for this game was its episodic release schedule. This was another thing that Ad Hoc borrowed from Telltale Games, except the release schedule was much faster. Dispatch got to build hype over 4 weeks as 2 new episodes released each week. I actually intended to wait until all the episodes were out, but by the time that episode 6 had released, I couldn't hold out anymore. The hype was too intense, and I blasted through the episodes available and then spent that week chatting excitedly with friends about the last 2 episodes to come out. I don't think Dispatch is a perfect game, and if we get a second season, I hope that it takes some bigger risks. But that brief period between episodes 6 and 7, that anticipation, will be what I remember when I'm recommending this game in the future. I'll admit that going into the Séance of Blake Manor, I knew less about Irish history than the game wanted me to. But as the game is fundamentally about that history, it prepared me for some of its most poignant moments. And the parts that I couldn't get in the game, I just used Google and Wikipedia to understand while I was playing. Each character in Blake Manor is both a suspect in the case of a missing woman and a fully formed person. I use the word interiority a lot while I'm discussing how characters are written, and you can tell that these characters all have a sense of self, and to an extent, you know the shape of that self. When this interiority collides with the game's Irishness is when this writing team shows the peak of their talent. No moment in this game delivers like the resolution of Miss Barbosa's story. I won't spoil her ending, but I will say there's power in a Steam achievement that just says reparations. Unfair Flips is a silly game about flipping a coin, and we actually got 2 of those this year, but I'll talk about the other one later. This game is the one where you flip a coin until you get 10 heads in a row. The thing about Unfair Flips is that it's in on the joke. It is committed to the truth of probability, and it wants you to know that. Even though your brain's going to work overtime to exert control over why this coin is landing on tails when you just want to flip heads. And the game takes that commitment to the bitter end. The game has 10 endings, and it chooses which of those endings that you'll see after you get 9 heads in a row. As the game says, that could happen immediately or never, because that's how probability works. But the endings are goofy. In my playthrough, I got a really straightforward one. My 10th flip landed on heads, and I got a gold star labeled "Goo job." But I watched Brendon Bigley play the game on Twitch, and at the end of his game, the coin landed on its side and rolled right off the table. It was an absurdist end to an absurdist video game, and Brendon's reaction has stuck with me ever since. I've been pretty vocal with my criticism of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, but I do think it is still a fantastic video game. I love the way it looks, the way it sounds, and the way it plays. I grew to love the parry and block system, and I think the character work is really inspired. Where I take issue is that I feel that despite the constant refrain of "for those who come after" and "when one falls, we continue," in the third act, the game abandons those ideas in favor of something flatter. For the sake of a twist, it completely shifts focus away from the people you've spent 30 hours with onto a different group of, I think, unlikable people, and in doing so loses its impact. I've talked all this out here on YouTube and with friends, and I've come to the conclusion that the message of continuing on through hardship for the sake of an entire world speaks more to me than a narrative focused on the grief of a small group of people. And that's why Luna's speech to Gustav in the early part of the game meant so much to me. She reminds him of these mantras and asks him to really evaluate if he still believes in them. This scene to me is reminiscent of that incredible Stellan Skarsgård speech from Andor Season 1. "I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see" feels like the more flowery, Star Wars-y equivalent of "for those who come after." And that's why, despite my criticisms, this is the part of Clair Obscur where I have no notes. Octopath Traveler 2 is a beautiful JRPG that I've tried to play before. The first time, I started with the character Particio, but about halfway into collecting the game's 8 party members, my interest fizzled. I just couldn't keep the momentum going. I wish that I had chosen Oswald back then. I started the game over this year on a whim and chose Oswald because my friend Steven talked up his story so much. And Steven was right. This is absolutely the way to begin this video game. You've got betrayal, you've got Oswald being framed for murder, you've got Harvey. Oswald is the perfect starter and has the most compelling plot setup among the cast. It speaks to my own humanity within minutes and also has the melodrama to sustain me when the game feels boring. Now that I know this team can write like that, I trust the game more when it's feeling dull. Octopath 2 isn't a game that I'm mainlining or anything, but Oswald's story means that it's something I'm always playing. Within seconds of beginning the demo for Fretless: The Wrath of Riften, I knew I was going to love this musical RPG. It wasn't the story or characters or anything like that. My reaction to Fretless was more physical. It was the warm acoustic guitar music and the way it felt to match my button presses to the strums and the beats. There's a physicality to playing Fretless that had me bobbing along. It's not something that I could explain or reason to you. Instead, sometimes a game just feels good, like in your body. Fretless isn't trying to do a lot narratively either. It's a simple story about a journey to a battle of the bands and an evil record label exec. Instead, the game shifts that depth to where it matters here: the music, the sound design, and the mechanics. These are not background or set dressing, they are what the game is doing. You can tell how much care and work was put into making this game by just how natural it feels in the hand. Fretless is a short little RPG that I can easily recommend. It is a game that has stuck with me, not because it engaged me intellectually, but because it impressed me in a more tactile, purely emotional way. I didn't set out to get into fighting games, really at all. It kind of just happened. When Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls was announced, I thought it looked neat, but thought, I'm not good at fighting games. But when the closed beta sign-up went out, I signed up anyway. I like Marvel a lot, and that was enough for me to try it for free. There's a pretty solid fighting game community over in the Worst Garbage Discord, and I jumped in looking to talk about the closed beta and hop into some matches. I had a great weekend, and afterwards, something happened that I didn't expect. I missed playing the game. Through talking to my friend Steven and the folks in that fighting game channel, I decided to try out Guilty Gear Strive. It was exactly what I was looking for, and I put a good amount of time into learning Kai since I found him to be a relatively simple character. But there's a fundamental problem with Guilty Gear Strive, and it's not that it's a bad game. It's just about access. The game doesn't have an active enough player base for me to find a match where I can actually learn something instead of getting destroyed. And that was enough friction to keep me from sticking to it. But 2XKO changed things. 2XKO immediately felt incredible in a really visceral way. Its simplified controls let me focus on learning the basics of fighting games while still being robust enough that there's room to grow. I don't have an attachment to the League of Legends characters really at all, but in 2XKO, they're visually and mechanically interesting in a way that draws me in and feels similar to both Guilty Gear and Marvel Tokon. But the real thing that kept me playing 2XKO is just how easy it is to play a match. This game is super active, despite being in early access, and that means I can basically always find a game. I'm not afraid to lose, but I'm able to find matches that are at least sort of balanced and let me learn from my failures rather than just get destroyed. Also, I have a friend from that Discord channel, shout out Scrub, that is regularly down to play. So I can get some casual matches in with someone that I can actually speak to and who's willing to teach me while they're also regularly wiping the floor with me. It was this combo that got me into fighting games, a game that looks and feels great, and an actual community around that game. People have said forever that it's community that makes fighting games great, but this is the first time that I've felt that myself. And now I've got folks to play Marvel Tokon with when it comes out. I asked James Lance why he and the team at Everybody House Games made QUp's multiplayer real. This is a coin flipping game that's also an esports game, but I didn't take the second half seriously at first. James told me that it was always envisioned to be multiplayer, that the esport part was both a joke and not. When I played the demo, I couldn't imagine a reason this incremental clicker game needed multiplayer. It didn't make sense why that would add any enjoyment. The game is a blast, with a surprising narrative and a skill building system that feels like a strategic Rube Goldberg machine. The esports part felt like a bit, but I was wrong. When QUp released in full, I spent several nights playing it with friends in Discord, and let me tell you, this game sings with friends. We spent hours yelling about our higher and higher Q point totals. We progressed through story moments at different paces and kept saying things like, wow, you're gonna love when you get to the thing I just saw. That week I spent playing the silly coin flipping esport game with friends is gonna stick with me for a long time. My game of the year arrived in a Discord message. In a Discord I'm in with some of my creator friends, we're always talking about solar punk science fiction and stories about climate disaster. Maybe one day I'll get to tell you more about why. In any case, we're always sharing links to games or writing about these topics, and one day in February, my friend AJ shared a link to the game Known Mysteries. Within an hour, I had completed that game and already started writing my script for the first video I put out this year. Known Mysteries runs on a tiny server that sits on the balcony of its developer, Kara Stone. It's low-tech but sustainable, running completely off of solar energy. It's not even always on. In fact, as I write this, the website is down, probably because it just hasn't been sunny there lately. I don't share this with you as a cute little fact about the game. I say it because it's the point of the game. The games that tend to work for me, the ones that I usually come on here and gush about, are the ones that cleanly pair mechanics to narrative. Known Mysteries is the first game that I've played that finds harmony between its narrative and its distribution method. It's a piece of interactive fiction about a woman navigating corporate-caused climate disaster, and it is running with near zero impact on the real-world climate. That's intentional. It's designed. It's a weird project, but it also shows Kara Stone's commitment to her values. I really admire what Kara has done with Solar Server and Known Mysteries. And in a year where so many games started out strong with spectacle and bombast, Known Mysteries is one of the few that holds up to scrutiny. It hit me like a brick and then had me dying to play it again. And while the game itself is incredible, it is the way that I found it that I'll remember. Known Mysteries didn't arrive in a Nintendo Direct or at the Game Awards or even a Jacob Geller video. It came to me from some trusted friends who share my taste and thought I might be interested. It's really rare for a game to make me aware of my body, and even rarer for me to come away thinking of that as a good experience. Gareth Damian Martin has done this to me twice now. In the first Citizen Sleeper, catastrophe was always near but rarely final. No matter what went wrong with your body or your credits, you could usually find a way to recover. There was always another cycle, another shot at balance, another way to claw yourself back to something resembling control. It felt kind of hopeful. Citizen Sleeper 2 understands something much colder, that sometimes life doesn't give you space to recover. Most of the time, life happens to us. The only choice we have in the matter is how to spend our time. Citizen Sleeper 2 is framed by two life-altering, risky procedures that mirror two real-life surgeries that Martin had to have. In its final hour, as you approach that second uncertainty, the game asks you to retrace your steps through the system that you've navigated the whole game. You revisit people you helped, people you hurt, and people who might not want to see you again. And as you do, the game begins to decay. Your action dice, the primary way that you exert agency within Citizen Sleeper 2, start to permanently glitch. Not because you failed a check or made a mistake, simply because time is passing. There is no outrunning this decay. You can only decide where you'll be while it happens, what conversations are worth having before your body refuses to cooperate. I spent a lot of the last few years being angry at what COVID took from me. I felt like I woke up one day and was 4 years older. It's common to resent aging, but this feels different. For a while there, we'd say, "What is time?" to communicate how it felt like March 2020 never ended. But the truth was that while everything felt frozen, my body was still moving forward, aging, and changing. Citizen Sleeper 2 didn't make peace with that for me. It didn't offer catharsis or control, but it did help me acknowledge the inevitability and prepare me to eventually come to terms with it. Marrying narrative, mechanics, and the phenomenon of having a body is a unique skill of this particular developer, and I'm just thankful I got to experience it again. Rumble by Pale Dusk can be a confusing song. It's definitely metal, but it's also inspirational J-rock. And there's a smooth sax line that pops in here and there. The song never settles on a single tempo or meter, and at any given moment, you might be dancing or screaming or crying along. In many ways, it reminds me of Porter Robinson's Nurture. It's taking a genre I typically don't enjoy and adding a layer of earnestness that makes it work for me. The guest artist on the track, Masato of Cold Rain, has a voice that pierces through the growls and the double kicks with a joy and a hope that I didn't expect from a metal track that goes this hard. It's the perfect song for the 100-line Last Defense Academy's first of 100 endings. The 100-line is a game with absolutely massive scale. This visual novel / tactics game hybrid from the creators of Danganronpa and Zero Escape nearly killed the company that made it. And while there's too much of that going around in the industry for my taste, in this case I think the risk might have been worth it. The 100-line is an incredibly silly video game. It wears the mask of a tropey killing game visual novel, but through my 90 plus hours and 22 endings, I saw more and more of what the game was hiding underneath. Not all of that hits, but the ambition is staggering and the hit rate is much higher than I expected. The 100-line loves video games. It loves science fiction and dating sims, killing games, and visual novels. The 100-line is a celebration of the art of video game creation, and ultimately I think that its reverence for the medium hits so much harder than any conversation about art in games this year. This wasn't my favorite game of the year. To be honest, it's not even close, but I have to admit that it made a mark on me. And the final battle of that first route, accompanied by Pale Dusk's chaotic track, is my single most memorable moment in gaming this year. These are the moments that I'm chasing every year. The ones I'm craving every time I sit down with a controller. They're the ones that make me so passionate about video games as an art form, and the ones that have me bursting with so much thought and emotion that I just have to write about them. When I say Flow State is a show about the games we get lost in, this is what I'm talking about. But that's a lot of words to say what Pale Dusk already said for me.